This is a story about a woman who is so obsessed with the other side that she tried to build a direct line to talk to ghosts. Her name was Lee Sober Shapiro. According to the legend, she was a brilliant woman from a wealthy family who dedicated her life to constructing complex electronic machines designed to summon entities from different dimensions. As the story goes, she documented her descent into darkness through a series of chilling Polaroid photos, capturing her physical deterioration as she got closer to the truth. But the weird part of the story is if you try to find her online, you can't. Despite all these specific details about her life and her tragic death, and the artifacts that are currently sitting in Zak Bagans Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, Lee Sober Shapiro has virtually no digital footprint, no news reports, no records, nothing. She's a ghost. So who was she? Was she a victim of a wealthy family trying to erase her shameful secret? Or is it possible that Lee Sober Shapiro is a modern ghost story that we've been tricked into believing? We're going to dive into the strange and possibly fabricated life of the woman who supposedly tried to call the dead. This is the story of Lee Sober Shapiro. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people. It's your best friend, Kenny, and we are back with another disturbing story. In the neon-lit landscape of Las Vegas stands Zak Bagans Haunted Museum. Zak Bagans is the frontman of the Travel Channel series Ghost Adventures. And this museum houses thousands of artifacts that are labeled as cursed or possessed. There's a lot of headline-grabbing items. The Dybbuk box, the Peggy doll, the Kevorkian van. But there's a quieter, more insidious exhibit that has baffled internet sleuths and horror aficionados alike. The story of Shapiro sounds like a movie. Bagans presents her as a reclusive, wealthy American socialite and amateur scientist who constructed elaborate radionics machines to bridge the gap between humanity and the cosmos. The legend claims that her experiments went disastrously wrong when she bypassed the benevolent spirit she sought and instead established a direct line to a malevolent entity residing in the demon's star, or the star system Algol. The contact allegedly began a rapid, terrifying physical and mental decline, which was documented in a series of harrowing Polaroid selfies, ending in her mysterious death surrounded by a circle of televisions broadcasting white noise. The final enticing hook of this legend is the story Bagans attaches to it, that Lee Sober Shapiro was effectively erased. He claims her wealthy family was embarrassed and used their influence to scrub her existence from the internet, leaving his museum as the sole place for her legacy. For an internet detective, this is a challenge. This is a person with a mystery who cannot be found. 2020 put the entertainment industry in a crisis. The pandemic halted travel, effectively grounding the Ghost Adventures crew. They were stuck in Las Vegas, and Zak Bagans turned his camera lens inward, filming a 4-part special within the confines of his own haunted museum. Zak Bagans needed new stories, but they couldn't go on new investigations. He had to mine the existing collection for stories that could sustain a television show. And in this environment, the Summoning Experiments room was elevated to a main story. The episode is called The Summoning Experiments, and it introduced the viewer to Lee Sober Shapiro. Bagans stated that the family of Lee Sober Shapiro was embarrassed by her activities and her demon talk, and thus scrubbed her from the internet and existence. The way that he has presented this story insulates it against fact-checking. If a viewer searches for her and finds nothing, the lack of evidence becomes proof of the conspiracy. It makes a mundane failure to find information a sinister cover-up. It makes it the story. The episode showed the physical evidence. Wooden boxes filled with wires, dials, and copper inputs, described as radionics devices. There were journals and plaques featuring mathematical equations, sketches of star systems, and the repeated invocation of Algol. And of course, there was the anchor of the horror, the Polaroids, images of a woman's face deteriorating over time, allegedly documenting her possession. Visitors to the Haunted Museum describe the Shapiro room as distinct from the others. While rooms like the Murderabilia section rely on the notoriety of serial killers, the Shapiro room relies on the unknown. There's an atmosphere of confusion and dread. The exhibit includes a mannequin staring at a television, recreating the alleged death scene, and the selfies are displayed to maximize the shock value of her physical decline. But was this a supernatural decline? The way that the story is presented forces the viewer to see demonic possession. But if you were to look at this through, for example, the medical lens of a doctor, someone might see some sort of debilitating disease like cancer or severe self-neglect associated with severe mental health issues. The center of the story is the erasure of Lee Sober Shapiro. If the family scrubbed the internet, tracing her should be impossible. However, if you search hard enough through genealogical databases, newspaper archives, and death indices, you will see that Lee Sober Shapiro was never erased. She was just a private citizen who died before the era of Facebook and Instagram. Lee Sober Shapiro was from Baltimore, Maryland, and she was born into the prominent Sober family. The claim that her history was scrubbed is demonstrably false. Lee Sober Shapiro's obituary was published in the Baltimore Sun on October 19th and October 20th, 2002. It lists her surviving family, her internment at Beth Jacobs Cemetery, and the funeral home that did her funeral. When her parents died in 2007, Lee was listed as the late Lee Sober Shapiro. All of these records have been hosted on legacy.com continuously since they were published. So why did Zak Bagans claim that she was erased? Well, Lee died in 2002. In 2002, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, and there was very limited blogging. An average person who died in 2002 leaves very little digital footprint beyond vital records. Bagans likely confused absence of digital noise with some sort of active erasure of her life. Bagans describes her as a socialite. In reality, while her family appears to have been comfortable, she was not a Kim Kardashian type figure whose every move would be in the tabloids. The socialite label was likely to explain why she had the money to build the strange machines, but doesn't fit the lack of press coverage. The internet wasn't scrubbed, but there are hints of a chaotic life that may have generated legal paper trails. Internet sleuths on Reddit dug into university alum newsletters and foreign language newspapers. One user claimed to find evidence of a Lee Shapiro involved in a kidnapping or missing persons case in Europe a few decades prior. And this fits with the testimony of her granddaughter, suggesting that the mystery around Lee was not about demons, but about international legal disputes and family instability. The erasure may have been a family trying to move past a traumatic series of events. This story is more of a human tragedy reality than a paranormal narrative, and that comes from the family itself. Lee's children have remained silent, likely due to the pain of the past, but her grandchildren, or her grandchild, has spoken. In February 2021, the popular paranormal true crime podcast, And That's Why We Drink, covered the listener story of Lee Sober Shapiro in Listener Stories Volume 52. This prompted Miranda Corson, who is Lee's granddaughter, to reach out to the host and provided a lot of the story that Bagans has either omitted or ignored. According to Bagans, Lee was a socialite scientist, but the reality, according to her granddaughter, was she was a Juilliard-trained concert pianist, and she was less than sane. The reality was Lee was a talented artist whose creativity may have been linked to her mental instability. Her granddaughter talked about how she had kidnapped her 10-year-old son, who was her dad, to Europe and Egypt, and that Lee had a history of dangerous, erratic behavior long before the machines were built. She had also said that she was not allowed to know her granddaughter. And this sounds like the silence was protective, that she was being shielded from a mentally ill relative, not a cover-up relating to demons. Her granddaughter did confirm that Lee had an interest in the occult, owned a satanic Bible, and spoke of the seventh hell. It appears that a realtor sold the items and story to Zak Bagans via eBay, and the lore was likely embellished at the point of the sale to increase the value of the estate's junk. Miranda Corson is a real person. She is an art teacher. She lives in the Dallas, Texas area, and public records document her work. Miranda approached the story with fascination and sadness. She was not looking to make any money off the story, but she wanted to correct the record. She acknowledged the cool factor of the ghost story while grounding it in the trauma of her father's kidnapping. And she both acknowledged the lore and the pain of the story, which to me makes her sound like a highly credible witness. Miranda's revelation that the realtor sold the items on eBay is a smoking gun about the hoax aspect. A realtor clearing out a deceased estate finds a basement full of weird wires, disturbing photos, and occult books. And they have an opportunity to either throw it away or they can throw it on eBay as the haunted ghost machines from a possessed socialite. Bagans' job is to be constantly scouring the internet for content. So he bought the lot. And he bought the story along with the objects. He didn't spend a lot of time fact-checking the mental health history. He amplified the demon angle because that's his business. One of the most specific details of the Lee Sober Shapiro story is her fixation on the star system Algol. In the Ghost Adventures episode, Bagans highlights journals and plaques that label Algol as the source of the being of light and the ultimate darkness. This is a key detail in the psychological landscape of Lee Sober Shapiro. Algol is one of the most culturally cursed stars in the night sky. It's an eclipsing binary star. It consists of a bright primary star and a dimmer secondary star. Every around 3 days, or 2.87 days, the dimmer star passes in front of the brighter one, causing the star's light to wink or dim visibly from Earth. To ancient observers, a star that changed brightness was scary. It was the winking eye of the demon. In Greek mythology, it represented the severed head of Medusa. In Arabic, it was the head of the ghoul. Shapiro's writing supposedly described a battle between light and darkness near Algol. This is an occult interpretation of the actual astronomical phenomenon of the eclipse. She was interpreting this star through her delusional lens. The most damning evidence against the supernatural reality of the story is the fact that it exists in literature that predates the Lee Sober Shapiro story. Redditors have identified that Lee Sober Shapiro's life story, as presented in the museum, is nearly identical to the plot of H.P. Lovecraft's short story Beyond the Wall of Sleep. In Beyond the Wall of Sleep, the protagonist is an intern at a psychiatric hospital, and the subject is Joe Slater, who is a lunatic patient dying in an asylum. In the Lovecraft story, a cosmic radio was built to facilitate telepathic communication. Lee Sober Shapiro built radionics machines with input and output wells to communicate with spirits. The entities in both stories are beings of light, either trapped in a human body or contacted via this machine. And there is a battle with stars between light and darkness. The ending of the H.P. Lovecraft story involves the patient dying as the entity departs to the star. In the Lee Sober Shapiro story, Lee dies as the entity consumes her. The overlap between the two is too close to be just a coincidence. There's two possibilities here. Either Bagans or his researchers recognized the weird science aesthetic of the props and crafted a backstory using public domain horror fiction to flesh it out. Or Lee Sober Shapiro was suffering from a break with reality while reading Lovecraft. So she internalized the story. It's ostension. In her delusion, she became the intern scientist. She built the machines to replicate the device in her story. And her journals were scripts of her delusion instead of being records of the haunting. Given the family testimony regarding her mental health, the fact that these scripts are likely her delusional rantings is the most likely theory among people who've researched this story. The phenomenon of ostension is living out a legend. Lee was role-playing this story that eventually consumed her life. So what were all these machines? The machines are called radionics devices. Radionics is a pseudoscience that was developed in the early 20th century by Albert Abrams. It claims that healthy people and body parts emit specific energy frequencies, or radium, and disease is distortion of this frequency. Radionics black boxes typically consist of dials calibrated to arbitrary numbers, a well for a sample of either blood or hair or a photo, and a stick pad, a rubber or copper plate that the operator rubs until it feels sticky to indicate a hit. Lee's machines follow this design. They feature the wells, the dials, and the wiring. However, she changed the purpose. Instead of tuning into a liver to cure jaundice, she was trying to tune into a star system to cure her loneliness or to contact the being of life. Lee's work fits into a broader history of instrumental transcommunication. From Edison's rumored ghost phone to the spirit box that is in Bagans Museum today, there's a deep desire to use technology to solve the problem of death. These machines are sad because they're junk science. They mimic the look of scientific devices with wires and inputs and data, but they function on magical thinking. The fact that she was building these in her final years suggests a desperate attempt to use science to fix a problem that was more psychological. The most disturbing and visceral element of the exhibit is the series of Polaroid selfies. Bagans claims they show her face morphing into a demon. But if you get rid of the demon idea, the photos show something arguably more disturbing: the rapid physical decline of a woman in crisis. The gaunt, hollow-cheeked look described in the later photos is consistent with cachexia, or wasting syndrome. This is common in late-stage cancer, but could also be common in the physical neglect that accompanies psychosis. Maybe she stopped eating because she believed her food was poisoning, or she was turning in her frequency to the star. It ends up being a feedback loop. Imagine a woman suffering from body dysmorphia, so she takes a photo, and she interprets this as the entity is winning. She stops sleeping. She takes another photo. She looks worse. The photos confirm the delusion, accelerating the behavior. The Polaroids are evidence of a spiral rather than evidence of a haunting. So what is the story of Lee Sober Shapiro? Well, it's a nuanced verdict. It's a hoax, but it's a hoax insofar as that Zak Bagans presented the story in the museum in a way that wasn't a truthful representation of reality. Bagans fabricated or heavily exaggerated the idea of an internet scrub to explain the lack of information about a person who died before social media. This was a marketing tactic to create a forbidden knowledge allure. The exhibit exploited her severe mental health crisis and featured delusional writings and machines that were built to satisfy a psychosis, as well as photos of physical wasting. And it repackaged them as demonic possession. And the story ignored the source of Lee's delusion, the Lovecraft story Beyond the Wall of Sleep. Because if you acknowledge that the demon was written by H.P. Lovecraft, it would be fiction, not fact. The story of Lee Sober Shapiro is a tragedy. It's a story of a talented, troubled woman who lost her way in the labyrinth of her own mind, finding solace in the dark stars or H.P. Lovecraft's imagination. Her legacy was pawned by a realtor and turned into a sideshow attraction instead of staying with her family. The fear is real, but the monster isn't in the machine, and it isn't in the star Algol. The monster is the system that takes a woman's private suffering, strips it of its humanity, and sells tickets to the spectacle. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you like, share, and leave a comment for the algorithm. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, leave a comment and tell me about it. Or send me an email. My email address is thespookyLawyer@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the channel, you can become a member of this channel. For the $1.99 tier, you can get access to exclusive content, including exclusive videos. You will also get access to my videos before they go public. I appreciate you considering this. You can also support me by continuing to like, share, and watch my videos. And I do appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.